We read news every day. News that's informative, but rarely encouraging. The InterMountain Christian newspaper aims to change that. They present the news you need to know, from what's going on in your community to your world, with encouraging words, motivation, and the resources you need to make positive changes in your life. What is your local government doing that you need to know about? What's happening in your community you need to be a part of? Whether it's a story from your neighborhood, a national story, or an encouraging word, you'll find biblical issues of everyday life in the InterMountain Christian newspaper. InterMountain Christian News is produced and supported by the work and donations of individuals and churches. You'll find it at churches, Christian bookstores, by subscription, and online at IMCNH04172014SenatorRussFulcher. To find out more about supporting this local resource, go online at IMCNews.org or call InterMountain Christian News in Boise, Idaho at 208-703-8688. The InterMountain Christian News, a voice sharing the truth on matters dear to people's hearts.
Are you tired of the secular news? Do you want a Christian view of politics? Do you want to know what is going on in your Christian community? Your wait is over. Welcome to the InterMountain Christian News Hour. Here is your host, Dr. Anthony Harper.
And today I'm blessed to have Senator Russ Fulcher, joining me, talking about the race for governor. And there are a lot of issues to address, a lot of Christian concerns. Senator Fulcher, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on, Dr. Harper.
And what I'd like to do is ask you, I'm actually going to start out with a statement and a couple questions here. And beginning, Christians in Idaho are concerned about the state of our state and nation and believe that from the preamble of the Declaration of Independence that we are endowed by Jesus with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, it goes on to say, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This is a kind of a, just a beginning statement that's important to know in relationship to the questions I'll be asking. And the first question is, what will you do as governor of our state to defend our state rights and to stand up to federal judges in protection of our state law of godly marriage of one man, one woman?
Well, do just that. In 2006, I was on the front end and actively engaged with the passage of the one man, one woman marriage amendment. And that was passed by both bodies in the Idaho legislature, and then it right at a supermajority of the people of the state of Idaho. So that's in the Constitution of the state, and we protect that. We need to stand for that. I will stand for that. It will be under challenge as we move forward, but it will be my objective to stand in line with that, to do so again. I've done it already, and I'll do it again. But that also means that the other laws that are being brought forth to the legislature, and the other proposed laws, I should say, we will have to defend that same sanctity with some of those challenges via statute.
Yes, along with that, there's a serious concern, though, that we see this happening in other states. A federal judge will declare unconstitutional a state's marriage law. And I think a lot of Christians are looking for a governor that would say, our state's rights trumps the federal judge's decision, so we will not honor your decision, federal judge. And so states' rights or state law remains in effect. I know that there is a concern for some governors that the federal government, and it has before, threatened to remove federal funds, kind of a blackmail thing. But what do you believe about that issue? Is it possible for a governor to say no to a federal judge and not acknowledge their decision and say something strong like that the state law stands, we're not going to do any appeal because state law is what we're going to go with?
Well, it is possible, and let me approach it this way. The federal government was created to serve the states, not the other way around.
Right.
And so we need to be mindful of that as we go about the business of our state. I have already supported it was flown under what's called nullification flag earlier, where in circumstances clearly where a federal entity steps outside of constitutional boundaries, I believe that the state not only has the right, but the obligation in order to defend its constitutional position. And to me, the Constitution makes this issue clear.
Yes.
Now, so to that end, it would be my duty and my intent to protect it. To that end, I would also add that it's important that we have the legal entity within the state through the Attorney General's office of like mind. And right now, personally, I question that. But as far as the control that I have and far as my own mind and my own way of thinking is that is not just the right, but it's the obligation of the state to protect that. I'll do so to the best of my ability.
So that would include if a federal judge declares unconstitutional in our own state, which is very likely to happen, that you would say in response back to the federal judge, the state law supersedes your decision, and we will not pursue any appeal. We'll just keep it as it is.
Well, that would be my position. Before you can say a blanket statement, I need to see the specifics of the case, but that's certainly my position on the issue. And so many times with things like this, the devil is in the details, but philosophically, that's my position on this issue.
Well, we have Christians, a lot of Christians are praying for you and other leaders here and about this issue, for courage to stand against opposition. And so we do pray for...
thank you for that. That's something that we desperately need, I believe.
Yes. And another question would be, what would you do as governor to defend our state rights of our state and stand up to a federal judge in protection of children by opposing abortion?
Well, first of all, just the overall position on abortion. Life begins at conception. Mm-hmm. That's my personal belief, and my actions in the legislature over the last 10 sessions have supported that. I would also roll in a very closely related issue that, frankly, is getting probably as much, if not more, threats to it or threats to the Christian view of life, and that's euthanasia. Mm-hmm. And I'm personally very concerned about that as this federal health care gets rolled out and is imposed upon the states. So back to your question specifically, I believe that if there is an issue where it is important for the state to not comply if there is a mandate on those types of things, that would be it. And I believe some other states have already done it in relation to the healthcare law. You may know that there is a mandatory abortifacient provision in the Affordable Care Act component. And I believe that that's an unconstitutional component. I believe we should legally challenge that, and I believe we should do everything within our power to prevent that from taking place. Same thing with the so-called death panel, as they're nicknamed, on the life issue towards the end of life as opposed to the beginning of life. But we've got to do everything within our power to prevent that from taking place in this state.
Well, I've heard the comment about otter care, a statement about otter care. The state of Idaho has accepted, I guess, a state exchange or something, and a lot of Christian people are concerned about Obamacare, which I would say that would be more likely called the Unaffordable Affordable Care Act. But what is your position for the state of Idaho and this? I know Governor Otter has. He's in a difficult position at times regarding the state exchange. What's your opinion on that issue?
I need to give you some explanation on that, because this is one of the primary reasons that I am doing what I'm doing. When this issue was before the legislature, one of the primary components was the mandatory abortifacient component of the Affordable Care Act. I fought that on the Senate floor. Collectively, we made to move to put an amendment on that bill so that we would not follow that mandate. We would not enforce that mandate. We would pull that component. And the governor would not stand with us. In fact, the majority of legislators that call themselves pro-life would not stand with us. That is not acceptable.
Okay, so
we voted in place a law that had the mandatory abortifacient component in the Affordable Care Act, and we did so voluntarily, and the governor would not stand with us. And so that is one of the primary reasons that I have chosen to run for governor, was that as part of the Affordable Care Act is not acceptable in the state of Idaho. It is not in line with the values of Idahoans. It is not in line with our God-given inalienable rights, and it is not in line with the will of the people. And we have to make difficult decisions. It's clear. I understand that. But when a federal or any outside entity comes and mandates something that is against our moral and Christian principles, we have to stand. And I'm standing, and the governor didn't.
So currently, the governor is still supportive of leaving the abortifacient drugs in that.
As far as I know, he's done nothing to try to discourage that, and everything to comply with it.
Okay, well, we also, as I mentioned, have serious concerns just about the Obamacare in general. It's been very costly. People are losing their coverage. It's a serious concern for the federal government having too much control. And we're in serious state, I believe, and so...
That is true, and Dr. Harper, I just have to add, this was not something that we had to do. The governor has made the argument that we had two choices, a federal exchange or a state exchange, and that is not the case. The real issue was that we have the choice of a federal exchange operated by federal employees or a federal exchange operated by state employees. And by ushering in the latter, which is what he did, we accepted those components of the Affordable Care Act voluntarily. That's wrong.
Okay. I understand. It's a very serious issue.
This is life or death. This is control of our society. This is the issue that will define us. This is the most damaging legislation in our lifetimes.
I'm Dr. Anthony Harper here with the InterMountain Christian News Hour, wanting to share the gospel message with you. It is clear that you hear the message and respond as soon as possible. In John 3:16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life." Please humble yourself today and admit your sins and ask Jesus to forgive you of your sins and be your Savior today before it's too late. If you died today without Jesus, you would be lost forever in hell, which does exist, contrary to what you've heard from Oprah Winfrey and so many others. Please respond today. To learn more about having a relationship with Jesus, you can check out our website, imcnews.org, and at the top left of our website, you'll see a Who is Jesus banner ad, so you can click on that for more information. Also, you can call 24/7, this toll-free number, 1-888-NEED-HIM. And there's also a website, www.needhim.org. Once again, that 24/7 telephone number, toll-free, 1-888-NEED-HIM.
Are you tired of the secular news? Do you want a Christian view of politics? Do you want to know what is going on in your Christian community? Your wait is over. Welcome to the InterMountain Christian News Hour. Here is your host, Dr. Anthony Harper.
We have a lot to deal with and a lot to pray about. Actually, we have the National Day of Prayer coming up here, May 1st. It's a Thursday, so I invite people to be in serious prayer for our nation. More information is at the nationaldayofprayer.org website. But I look forward to seeing you next month, hopefully at that. I know they're going to have something at the Capitol for the National Day of Prayer.
What's the date of that again?
May 1st. Thursday, May 1st.
Very good.
I think it's at noon at the state capitol. But, on to the next question is, what will you do as governor to defend our state rights rights of our states in standing up to a federal judge that would, in regard to protection of our rights to express and operate our ministries, our Christian ministries and businesses according to our spiritual convictions, in light of, recently a federal judge in New Mexico overriding the right of that Christian business person, a camera, I think it was a photography place. So they weren't allowed to follow their spiritual convictions and being forced to, do pictures for homosexual weddings. Well, that has also happened in Christian business in florists, or baking cakes, for homosexual weddings or whatever. And this is an ever-increasing alarming trend for a federal judge to declare unconstitutional for that Christian ministry or business to do that. So what would be your response?
Well, first of all, just like with these other issues we've talked about, it's the role of the state leadership to stand. It's the role of that state leadership to defend the individuals within their borders. And whether it's this issue, whether it has to do with the marriage issue, whether it has to do with the land issues we've seen in Clark County, Nevada. Where was the governor in Nevada for Clark County? Where was the attorney general? Where was the sheriff?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to stand with your people, and that's part of the responsibility that I believe a governor has. It would be the same case here. This nation, and it's important to make a distinction about religion specifically. This nation was formed largely due to the initiative to get access to religion, to get freedom of religion. That's one of the foundational blocks. And as that gets encroached upon, I believe it's the duty, or the right and the duty of the governor to defend it. Not just the governor, but I think it's every elected official. I think it's the right of the people to defend it. I would do everything within my power to defend that religious freedom.
That's good to hear. And we do appreciate you standing for truth and not compromise. There is a lot of compromise going on in the church, first of all. I see a lot of that. And in our government. And we've got to have strong principles founded upon what the founders of America gave us in their respect for the Bible and the Ten Commandments and all that. And so we do need a governing, foundation, and we see God's Word, the Bible, having the answers. The situations. On to the next question regarding our state rights for Second Amendment rights to bear arms. I've heard it said that if the Second Amendment goes away, then we can't defend the other rights.
I believe that's largely true. There are certain things that just aren't negotiable when it comes to the rights of the individual. The right to life is one of those. The Second Amendment rights is one of those. The right to property is one of those. The right to the free market is another one of those. Those are just components that we cannot forfeit. There has never been in the history of the world a society that has forfeited or been stripped of its right to bear arms where it's worked out well for the people. Mm-hmm. And I believe that is true also here. There is a reason that is under such pressure, because when individuals have that right, it does hold in check, to some extent, an aggressive government. And so that's another one of those issues. It's non-negotiable. It's got to be held dear, and it's got to be protected, and it will, just like these other issues you're talking about. These are all sensitive issues. They are all under fire. It's the responsibility of our state leadership to protect it. I'll do the best I can to do that.
Well, that's a good comment about being under fire. It's kind of related to the right to bear arms. So
that's right.
No pun intended, right? So.
And it's on multiple fronts, Dr. Harper. I mean, from the restriction of magazines to the background checks to the coding of ammunition to the unavailability of ammunition.
Right.
I mean, it's those in opposition will take numerous and creative steps to try to strip that right from our people we've got to defend it every way we possibly can.
Well, I and some other Christians do see this as, the issue of having to register your gun as a violation of the Second Amendment. As long as the government knows where your gun is at, then there's more control, and they can take it away from you. But this is a serious concern for a lot of people that it's unconstitutional to have to register your gun.
Well, I think that there's some real concerns there, and I'll also just mention that I was pretty public here within the last month during legislative hearings and press communications afterwards. I do support what's called constitutional carry. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you can legally procure a weapon, you meet the criteria to legally procure a weapon, then I don't believe that you should have to have a concealed carry permit and all of the restrictions and the process that comes with it, because that right is granted constitutionally. And so my position is relatively well documented there, and I think that even the laws we have now are too restrictive.
Yeah, I would think that even the NRA may support that right, the constitutional right not to have to register your arm, but that you have that constitutional right to have a weapon, according to the Second Amendment.
Yes.
And then I'm just curious, on another note, if you'd heard about the movie Agenda, Grinding America Down by previous Idaho legislator Curtis Bowers. And I see that movie accurately documenting the state of our union. And for our listeners, there is a website about that, agendadocumentary.com. Well, if you've seen that movie, if so, what do you think of it?
I've seen one of Representative Bowers' publications, and I don't know if it was that one or not. I think he's put out more than one.
More than one. This was his first one.
Okay, then I've seen it, and it was I didn't recall the title of it, but it was a fabulous portrayal, and I think an accurate portrayal of what is transpiring. And my understanding is he's got another one either that is out or that is in the works. I look forward to seeing that one too.
Yes, and of course more information at the website agendadocumentary.com. In that movie, Senator Fulcher, he references Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky, one of the, I guess, most well-known community organizers and an influence on our own president and Hillary Clinton and many others. And in Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, it's strange, Senator Fulcher, that he has a dedication in his book to Lucifer, the greatest radical of all.
Well, it's given what the content of that is, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's completely in conjunction with the history of what Lucifer did and the destruction that followed. And those are the strategies that we're facing. There's a point that's related to this directly that I think needs to be made. Mm-hmm. Conservative people, Christian people who follow Christian principles have a tendency, and understandably so, to just want to be left alone. They don't, they're self-sufficient. They're independent by nature. They're the faith base that we adhere to is not one that is starved for power. On the other hand, the secular worldview or the secular foundational people who are rooted in that secular foundation, Saul Alinsky among them, just the reverse. They have they're starved for power and for authority, and they don't want to just be left alone. They want to drive the agenda. They want to drive the debate, if you will. They want to push the envelope to liberal means. And so that's why the minority, the active liberal minority, oftentimes will make more progress, and we see these liberal tendencies because they are actively moving for it, and they're actively driving to that end when the conservative, the Christian mindset is to just leave us alone, just leave us alone. The next thing you know, we've compromised into an environment that is much more liberal than the people that are there. And here's where I think it's important for us as Christians, for us as conservatives to say, look, we can't operate this way anymore. We have to have our own agenda. We have to have our own vision. We have to have our own direction, and we have to drive towards it. That means we collectively put forth initiatives to push control away from the government back to the people. And this is something that is part of my vision moving forward, and part of what I would do as governor is to try to structure the government to be a servant once again, not the ruler. Government should be a servant of the people, not the ruler of the people. Mm-hmm. And that, in order to achieve that, we have to drive towards it and dissolve some of these controls and push that authority and responsibility back to the individual, back to the family. That would be part of a very important component of my vision, of my agenda as governor.
Okay. What is the main difference between your campaign for governor and Governor Otter's campaign?
That's one of them right there. Secondly, I have a vision on a number of components that I don't know what his vision is, and I've worked with him closely for the last few years. But mine includes just what I mentioned to you, plus 4 points. Number one is we have to get a private alternative to the Obamacare exchange. It has to be one that puts the control in the hands of the people, not the government, and the free market, not the government. The second thing we need to do is we need to get access to the resources God gave us. We have incredible wealth in this state. We have prosperity waiting to be tapped into. It's called our lands. And the government has greatly restricted our access to our wealth. We have minerals, timber, natural gas, all these things that are more than enough from what we need in this state to be prosperous, but we can't touch it. We've got to go get that. That will allow us to do the third thing, reduce our dependency on the federal government. 36% of Idaho's budget comes from the feds. They're broke. We have got to break that chain. We have got to become independent, and you do that by getting your economy going through your natural resource base. The fourth thing is our education system. Idahoans need to control the education system, not the government. It is not by coincidence the federal government is out to control our health care, and they're out to control our education system, because if you control those things, you control the people. We have to push back on that.
Along with that is atheism is so prominent in our public school system, and no forum at equal footing to have the creation view. And, of course, the Bible used to be in all the public schools at one time, but a lot of people don't respect having this is the best document that I know of, and I'd like to see that back in the schools more. But I don't know if you've heard Dr. Chuck Selden. There's a website, OurGodlyAmericanHeritage.com, or you may have heard David Barton as well.
I'm absolutely familiar with it.
Yeah, some great resource. Then finally, Senator Fulcher, I just wanted to invite you to learn more about our experience at the White House and ask some questions about Christian concerns for America. We had a chance to see about that at our website is IMCNH04172014SenatorRussFulcher. But it's quite an experience being at the White House and trying to represent Christian concerns, and a lot of reporters are afraid to ask challenging questions, and especially of any spiritual nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We see that across all, I think, of the press corps. They don't want to get into that unless it's a challenge to some of the norms that we have had in Western society for millennia.
Yeah. Mentioning the name of Jesus in the White House is not easy. And we need to be more proud of who Christ is. And in light of that, we have our resurrection, a celebration of Christ's resurrection here this Sunday, Easter. So I want to remind people to honor Christ. And I do appreciate you, Senator Fulcher, joining me today for the program.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. God bless you with a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm Dr. Anthony Harper here with the InterMountain Christian News Hour, an outreach of the InterMountain Christian newspaper making a difference. And we need your support of good news. Check out our website at imcnews.org, where you can download our newspaper and make your tax-deductible donation to support our voice, our Christian concerns at the White House and in Israel and other places. do go online to make your donation and to support this important news ministry, the only evangelical Christian newspaper of its kind, a grassroots newspaper in our Intermountain regions, spanning from Colorado over to Reno, Nevada. And we currently have needs to cover our travel expenses for White House and Israel trips. And also, we need a donated minivan, a vehicle, a good condition, low mileage, air conditioning, and automatic transmission for delivery of our newspapers and other news events that we go to cover representing Christian concerns. So please make your donation tax deductible online at imcnews.org just by clicking on the donate banner ad that you see there. Thank you for your support of our good newspaper and for your prayers, most importantly, that we can continue to be a voice of truth for Christians in our Intermountain region, for the glory of God.
We read news every day, news that's informative but rarely encouraging. The InterMountain Christian newspaper aims to change that. They present the news you need to know, from what's going on in your community to your world, with encouraging words, motivation, and the resources you need to make positive changes in your life. What is your local government doing that you need to know about? What's happening in your community you need to be a part of? Whether it's a story from your neighborhood, a national story, or an encouraging word, you'll find biblical issues of everyday life in the InterMountain Christian newspaper. InterMountain Christian News is produced and supported by the work and donations of individuals and churches. You'll find it at churches, Christian bookstores, by subscription, and online at imcnews.org. To find out more about supporting this local resource, go online at imcnews.org or call InterMountain Christian News in Boise, Idaho at 208-703-8688. The InterMountain Christian News, a voice sharing the truth on matters dear to people's hearts.